Mike Brown, the former FEMA director.
Joining us here is the former FEMA director.
History, I think, was very unkind to you, my friend. Very unkind.
Mr. Brown, thanks for being with us.
This is Michael Brown Unplugged.
Oh my, everybody. Happy Friday and welcome to Michael Brown Unplugged. There's a lot I want to get to before Christian gets in here to do Hollywood and Toto. So let's get right to it. Those of us who, you know the old saying that history repeats itself. Well, some of us are just getting to that age where, and quite frankly, that doesn't mean you're old. It just means that you are, you're older than 6 years old. If you're older than 6 years old, you are beginning to understand that the old adage that history repeats itself is actually true. Those of us that remember back to 1988 when Joe Biden, then the famous senator from Delaware, decided that he wanted to run for the United States presidency. And in so doing, it was discovered that he had plagiarized some things. And when that whole issue of plagiarism broke out, even back in the dark ages, Joe Biden was required to withdraw his candidacy for the presidency of the United States. So now let's fast forward to 2019. And of all places, CNN has the intestinal fortitude to point out
Joe Biden's campaign fending off allegations of plagiarism today after revelations that the former vice president's brand new climate change policy plan copied language directly from multiple liberal activist groups and a news site. The instances circulated on social media yesterday just hours after the plan was posted by the campaign online. The Biden campaign claiming simply a matter of some missing citations, but it was a similar allegation that helped sink Biden's 1988 presidential campaign. CNN's Arlette Saenz joins us live from Manchester, New Hampshire. Arlette, forgive me here, having lived through the 87-88 campaign. This is a pretty amateur mistake for the frontrunners campaign to make on a substantial policy rollout when they had to know, when Team Biden got together planning to announce his campaign, the one thing they cannot do is plagiarize.
Oh, but it worked so well back in 1988. Let's do it again. I know sometimes I am. People call me cynical. I don't think I'm cynical. I think I'm realistic. The old Biden is the same as the new Biden. The new Biden is the same as the old Biden. Biden is Biden. You plagiarize once, you plagiarize twice. It wouldn't surprise me that it never crossed their mind. Hey, guys, we found this great information about climate change on some website. In fact, I think it may be Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and everybody loves her because she's so cute and she's so sweet. Why don't we just copy what she has to say? Because everybody loves her, and if they love her, maybe they'll love us too. Yeah, hey, y'all guys, why don't you just go ahead and copy all of that? It's just a matter of missing citations. Let me ask you this. If you were writing your thesis, and I know that writing a thesis, in fact, maybe we should do that. Maybe what we ought to do is start requiring that every presidential candidate in both parties, any party, I don't care, you're running on the dog catcher party, you're running on the Green Party, you're running on the Blue Party, you're running on the Republican, Democrat, whatever party it is, you have to submit a thesis. Yes. Why I want to be president. And you have to footnote every single thing. Because then we can run it through that plagiarism software that colleges and universities use to see if you've copied everything from Wikipedia. And then if we find out that you've actually plagiarized stuff, or in the Biden case, well, we just forgot to put in citations, boom, you're disqualified. We could probably eliminate, there's 24 Democrats running? We could probably eliminate 24 Democrats. And then on the Republican side, well, because Trump's never written anything he wrote the book, The Art of the Deal, but actually he had a ghostwriter write that book for him. So I'm not sure you can't plagiarize yourself. So Trump might actually be safe. Yes, I think, so here it is. Just remember, the whole idea now is thesis for the presidency. That's all you need to know. So Colorado is on pace to have its lowest number of gun sales in more than 5 years. Gun sales, according to Colorado Public Radio, yes, see, I listen to everybody. Gun sales have trended down since Trump took office, but the decline has accelerated. Gun sales haven't gone up for 12 straight months. Back in April, the Colorado Bureau of Investigation reported that more than 14,000 background check approvals for handguns or long gun sales had been consummated. In the first 4 months of this year, there have been more than 112,000 such background check approvals. For all of 2018, the number was 340,000. And between 2017 and 2018, background check approvals were down more than 5%. Now, the Colorado Bureau of Investigation reports that background checks have fallen by 10% so far this year, which translates to 13,000 fewer guns sold. What is wrong with you people? What are you doing? Get out and buy your guns. Get out and buy your guns now. What is wrong? And let me give you a reason why you need to buy your guns. Boom, 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 boom. You ready? According to the Popo, there's a suspect identified by the name of Ezra Benner. Ezra Benner has been charged with disorderly conduct in Seattle, according to the King County prosecutor Dan Satterberg. He's an alleged member of a local Antifa group. He was arrested Monday evening for attempting and failing very badly. What do you think this Antifa member did? Let me set it up this way. Before I tell you the rest of the story, let me just set it up for you this way. Most of you, if not all of you, at some time or another, either at a wedding, a social event, or God forbid, some corporate meeting that you had to go to, you were in a hotel ballroom. And they have all those uncomfortable straight back chairs that hook together so that everybody is, shoulder to shoulder, and there's really no room, and you got to keep your legs together. You can't do any mansplaining. You can't, man spreading or whatever it's called. You can't do any of that. You're just stuck in the chairs. And there's somebody with, of course, they have a PowerPoint. Oh my God, they've got a PowerPoint. And so they're standing up front in a PowerPoint, and you're sitting there because you had a big breakfast because you're on an expense account, or maybe it's because you're at a wedding or some sort, and now there's, some reception going on, and you're sitting in those chairs, and you've had too much to eat, you've had too much to drink. The air conditioning isn't working quite as well as it should, so it's getting a little stuffy. You're beginning to yawn, and you know how your eyes begin to droop? Much like when you're listening to this program, when you're listening to the podcast, and your eyes begin to droop, and you're just thinking, okay, nobody's looking. I'm going to slowly close my eyes. And so you close your eyes, and you're sitting there in a stupor. Now, you don't know where the exits are. You don't anticipate an earthquake. You don't anticipate a terror attack. You don't anticipate the fire alarm going off. You don't anticipate anything. Now comes the rest of the story. An alleged member of a local Antifa group was arrested Monday evening for attempting to chain the doors, locking conservative students in a University of Washington classroom. The final meeting of the University of Washington College Republicans, held in Thompson Hall, featured two guest speakers from a local YouTube channel, Operation Cold Front. Parenthetical here. You may or may not have heard, but on Wednesday, YouTube began cracking down, demonetizing people like Steven Crowder and a whole bunch of other people because, it's time for the crackdown. It's time for the night of broken glass. It is time to shut down those people that are expressing things that go against the thought police at YouTube. The meeting at the University of Washington caught the attention of Emerald City Antifa. On their website, the group encouraged members to show up to disrupt the event. So one person, at least, did show up, though it's unclear, according to the news reports, I have to be honest here, it's unclear whether or not he is directly connected with the Facebook page, but he obviously read the Facebook page because he knew about the meeting, and he did indeed show up. But he did more than just simply try to disrupt the event. He tried to lock the students in the ballroom with a chain and a lock. Jason Rantz has a show on KTTH in Seattle. It's the University of Washington station, I think. A member of the group, Zach Wildfang, said on the station, "I saw a guy in black approach the door, but there hadn't been any protests outside or anything, so Antifa wasn't necessarily on my radar. He crouched down and immediately slapped chains around the door." Now, fortunately, it didn't work because the chains were making so much noise as they banged against the door that it immediately alerted students. Because you know how there's always somebody at the back of the room, right? You know, you get tired, so you stand up and you go to the back of the room because you think, oh my dear Lord, if I can just stand up for a while, I can get the blood circulating so I can stay alive through this interminable meeting. So you go to the back of the room. Or you go to the back of the room because, well, that's where the refreshments are. So you go to the back of the room because you want to get, a bourbon and Coke or a Diet Coke or whatever you want to get. So you're standing in the back of the room and suddenly you hear, and you know that rattling. I wish I had chains here in my studio. But you know what the rattling of chains sounds like. So you're standing near the back door when suddenly you hear this heavy rattle of chains, and you look around and you look through the narrow windows in the door. You look and here's some goober trying to lock you in. We heard the rattling from inside, according to the college Republican president Chevy Swanson. We looked to see through the window and see that someone was messing with the door. And it's very clear he was attaching a chain. So personally, I ran up to the door and opened it on him. The chain fell to the ground and he ran off, which is good, because I much prefer not to be chained in a room with 30 other people indefinitely. Now, everything was caught on video. Nothing bad happened. But what could have happened? Antifa, which has been known to defecate on police cars, which has been known to set on fire public property, personal property, private property. Can you imagine the panic that may have ensued? What would you have done? You're in the room, and suddenly you realize that some a-hole has now taken a chain and has padlocked you in the room. You are lying to me if you tell me that there would be no panic whatsoever. Because you don't know. I know you would look around to see where the exits are. You'd look around to see if there was another way out. But if you have an IQ of room temperature, you would, or if your IQ is more than room temperature, you would be thinking, what's next? And if you knew that it was Antifa, doesn't it cross your mind that perhaps somebody is about to set fire in the room? Or that somebody's about to set fire outside the room and you're going to suffocate from smoke inhalation? This is absolute insanity. We can't have simple disagreements about public policy without attempting to chain somebody in a room? My gosh, we're losing it in this country. Those of you that don't live in Colorado, let me tell you that we've had, I forget whether it's El Nino or El Nina. It's one of those two, but we're having one of those two. So we're having a very cool, wet summer. We're now into the 7th day of June, and we're having the typical, afternoon thunderstorms. But I think yesterday's high may have been in the 80s or something, but it's been very cool. In fact, it's been so cool and rainy that Tamara and I are just now getting around to having somebody come out and check the sprinkler system because the yard's just as green as can be because there's been so much rain and we haven't really needed anything. And yet I've been told since I was in high school and was reading Time magazine that climate change was going to doom us all. I think I'm probably going to die of old age before climate change gets to me. But here's where I'm really ticked off. I have completely, unassailably ruined my entire life. I don't make a lot of money. I Let me take a sip of Diet Coke. Maybe if I wouldn't drink so much Diet Coke, I'd have more money. But I haven't quite figured out, even as a lawyer, there's a lawyer joke in here somewhere. I haven't quite figured out how to scam people. I just don't know about scamming people. And if I had understood exactly what a scam global warming was, well, I would be on the speaking circuit just like Al Gore. Taxpayers will fork out more than $320,000 for the Climate Week conference where former U.S. Vice President Al Gore will, quote, communicate the urgency of the climate crisis. Alan Jones, one of the organizers, says that, well, that's not quite believable, that the Queensland government can be so awash with money as to bring this hypocrite Al Gore to Australia for a conference. When so many important instruments of government are underfunded, when farmers can't feed their cattle in Queensland, and $320,000 goes to waste on this shonk. Can you say shonk on a podcast? You see, if I was still on the radio, I'd have to be asking my producer, can I use the word shonk? Because apparently shonk is let me just look it up real quick, because shonk apparently is an Aussie term, and I'm sure, shonk. No, when I put in shonk, I get honk. Shonk. Okay, let me go to the Urban Dictionary. Shonk. What does shonk mean? Shonk. Oh, Australians use the word shonky and shonk to mean, respectively, poor quality or questionable goods or practices, and those who trade in them. Al Gore's trading in shonk. You might say he's a shonker. But here's the best part of the story. The Australian government is paying $320,000 for Al Gore to train people in climate witchcraft, and while they're doing it, it's snowing. The story goes like this. Al Gore is here in Australia to train 1,000 useful idiots in unscienced Neolithic reasoning and witchcraft. The man with no climate science expertise and a huge vested interest is being paid by taxpayers to train people to chant consensus and pretend that wind and solar can stop storms and hold back the tide. These obedient fools help to destroy any conversation about science by reciting anti-science bumper stickers like, the science is settled, gravity is real, and tobacco. I have no, but hey, the tobacco industry funded Merchants of Doubt, and they were wrong, so therefore, ergo, prompto, upchuck, all government scientists are right about everything all the time, and you're an idiot to be a climate denier. Well, Al Gore was there. It snowed. Yes, a rare snowfall hit Australia while Al Gore was there. Let's see. Snow fell in Queensland. The last time that snow fell in Queensland, 2015. Yeah. You know, if you remember the old days, you would bring the guy, you'd bring the rainmaker out because your area was suffering from a drought. I have a suggestion for any ranchers or farmers that are suffering from drought. Now, it's going to cost you $320,000, but if you just pay the $320,000 to bring Al Gore to come out and give a lecture about climate change or, global warming, you're sure to get a flood, snow, some sort of moisture just by having Al Gore there. And I don't know whether any of you are going to be playing dodgeball this weekend, but anything that does not promote the molding of children into soft, sissified, egalitarian dumbasses ought to be banned. And I think that includes dodgeball. This comes from Canada's National Post. When the Canadian Society for the Study of Education, I always get a kick out of the names of these organizations. When the Canadian Society for the Study of Education meets in Vancouver at the Congress of the Humanities and Social Sciences, a trio of education theorists will argue that dodgeball is not only problematic, but in the modern sense of displaying hierarchies of privilege based on athletic skill, that it is outright, and here's the word, I'm not making the word up, it's right here in the story, miseducative, miseducative, M-I-S educative, miseducative. I'm sorry. I apologize. Being miseducative apparently means that dodgeball counters the brainwashing that the authorities are trying to implement. So you can't have dodgeball because it's miseducative. It might teach you, I don't know, things like competition and self-reliance, and that, if you fall down, you actually might get hurt. Or, if the dodgeball, hits you in the groin and you're a male, well, it might hurt. A joy killer by the name of Joy Butler. You like that? A joy killer named Joy Butler. She's a professor of curriculum at the University of British Columbia. She's leading the attack by proclaiming that dodgeball reinforces the 5 faces of oppression as outlined by the University of Chicago social and political theorist Marion Young. I don't know Marion Young, but I don't care to get to know Marion Young. All I know is that she apparently has put together something called the 5 Faces of Oppression. I bet you're one of those 5. The story in the National Post continues. As Butler's abstract describes it, those faces are marginalization, powerlessness, and helplessness of those perceived as weaker individuals through the exercise of violence and dominance by those who are considered more powerful. Young's list of these fundamental types of oppression also includes exploitation and cultural domination. I'm thinking helplessness. Those perceived as weaker individuals. Is that the problem because now my whole story about the Antifa guy at the University of Washington that was trying to chain those students in the ballroom, not that he was going to do anything harmful. He was just going to lock them up. He was going to force them into confinement. Maybe he was just one of the 5 faces of marginalization, one of the 5 faces of oppression. So maybe we should actually feel sorry for him. It reminds me, there's a movie back from 2004, Dodgeball, a true underdog story. It kind of provides the example of the brutal oppression inherent in the game. From their viewpoint, high aloft in the ivory tower, academics can spot, a lot of the aspects of the culture that are theoretically not in sync with their ideology. All of those aspects are slated for eradication, which is going to be implemented by like-minded liberals in the media, and quite honestly, don't tell Tamara I said this, the like-minded liberals in primary education establishments. So bye-bye to dodgeball. No more dodgeball. And if your kids are going to play dodgeball this weekend, shame on you for engaging in the hierarchy of oppression. Hey, so welcome back, everybody. Glad to have you with me. As I said, it's Friday, but you guys already knew that. But because it's Friday, that means it's time for Hollywood and Toto. And Christian Toto joins me, as he usually does on Friday afternoons, or Friday mornings, I guess I should say, via Skype. Good morning, sir. How are you?
Good morning. I feel like I should have my own little trumpet, my own little fanfare. Da, 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 da.
Well, yeah, I could talk to Steve and see if we can't get a little, like a little trombone quartet right. Or something.
Or even the sad trombone. Wah,
wah. Here he is.
That might be more appropriate.
Here's Toto.
Here's Eeyore.
Here he is. So I want to get started. You mentioned, in fact, I read the article, and I have to say I was shocked, not shocked. But what was the name of the thing again? The FBI
Lovebirds.
FBI Lovebirds. And, well, just tell us the story.
Yeah, so we talked about this last week.
Why should I know it's my podcast, but why should I sit here and try to tell the story? It's your story.
I'll
right?
do the heavy lifting. I'm going to bend at the knees. So last week we talked about it. So FBI Lovebirds is a play. It's going to be put on this month in Washington, D.C., near the White House, right? And the problem began where someone agreed to host the show or rent its space, to use the more clear terminology, and then they abruptly canceled. And they said there was a threat of violence and they can't have the show go on. Now, the show itself isn't even a show. It is a dramatic reading of the texts between Peter Strzok and Lisa Page. They're the FBI agents who conducted a love affair via government phones and also seemed to conspire against Donald Trump, which is obviously much more important in the small and grand scheme of things. So that's the setup. The play is certainly pugnacious in a way, but this is from Fela McAleer, who does a lot of these shows where it's verbatim theater, taking the exact source material and not making it more dramatic, not adding any creative flourishes, not bringing their own interpretation to it, just reading it. And they hired Dean Cain and Christy Swanson to do the reading. Again, but very clever play.
But let me intervene because I really think that what you are doing here is you're not telling us the full story because this is a theater production. So they've rented the theater, they signed a contract, and a theater production involves, you have stagehands, you have costumes, you have set design, you have hundreds, if not thousands of people, and then you have all of the set creation. You've got people to do the lighting, the sound. You got to open and close the curtains. You have all the sets that you have to move around. You have all of these things that you have to do in a theater production. So you make it sound as though it's just going to be these two actors and possibly two chairs on a stage reading email. It can't possibly be that simple.
Well, I think it is streamlined, but you're right. Any kind of production does take a lot of effort.
I'm being
all
smart.
the things you mentioned.
Wait. I'm being a smart.
What?
It involves two chairs and two actors.
Well, but we don't know that exactly. We don't know the scope of it. And we also, when I think you make a good point. When you have a play, you need to produce it. You got to say who's going to be on hand. What about the sound? What about the lighting? What about who's going to work the particular event? And they didn't have a lot of time because they picked mid-June for this presentation, and they're going to tape it and put it on YouTube, assuming that YouTube will allow it to be shown on their increasingly nutty platform.
And you're right. It does require someone to actually operate the microphones, operate the mixers, do all of that. You have to have lighting, obviously. But in terms of what you and I think of as a theatrical production,
sure,
this is 99% simpler.
I would agree.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
In fact,
you have two actors who are coming. I'm sure they're living in Hollywood or elsewhere. You got to make sure that they're picked up at the airport. You got to make sure they're taken care of. There you go.
In fact, I might be stretching when I say there might be two chairs involved. McAleer might be requiring that they actually stand and read the emails too.
Maybe they're crouching like they're texting on their phone. So maybe what do you do when you're texting? You could be indisposed. You could be anywhere.
Oh, they could just be standing around kind of meandering on the stage with the glow of their phones in their faces. And that's really all the light you need.
Yeah, but you got to think all these things through. But I think you're distracting from the big point here. But
yes, we have successfully, which we're very good at. We have successfully buried the lead here.
I'm going to take a shovel to
it. Bulldozer. And the lead was you had promised me.
Yes,
Christian, you had promised me that you were going to reach out to dozens of production companies, and you were going to get them to explain that, oh, yes, this is awful, and, this is about the arts, and we should all stand up for the arts. And then, I don't know, maybe your website was hacked or something over at hollywoodandtoto.com, but it sounds to me like you were not, and in fact, the way I read the story, you didn't even get a single reply.
0 for 14. I reached out to 14 different theatrical groups. And by the way, just a little clarity here. Some of them I reached out to their PR people. Some of them I reached out to the people directly involved with it. I also reached out to these two theater companies. Their names in the story, and I forget the names of the theaters. But they staged a live reading of the Mueller report last weekend. Which is sort of
kidding.
The framing there is like, hey, we need to hear about this. This is anti-Trump. To me, that was what I thought of it as far as the reason why we need to read the Mueller report. Again, it's a perfectly reasonable situation. They can do whatever they want. If they want to read the Mueller report and say it's an indictment on President Trump, have at it. That's what the arts are all about. I thought it was another way to kind of, send a message and let the audience come away with whatever they want to come away with. But among the 14 groups I checked in with, those two I was particularly intrigued by. And I thought, well, I can't leave them out. So I reached out to them, and they were part of the 14 non-responses.
Total silence.
Total silence. And I even in my email said to them, what do you think? I didn't want to lead them. I said, is this a good thing, a bad thing? Is there a different way to put the show on? Related thoughts? I didn't want to kind of pigeonhole them into a response. I wanted to get their reaction.
You were a very good lawyer on cross-examination. You gave them an open-ended question so they could go any direction they wanted to go.
Yep.
And the direction they went was silence. Your Honor, instruct the witness to answer the question. Now, here's what I think, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I would like to know your take on this. My take is, based on their silence, they know you are right, and they know they have no response. I would have thought that somebody would have at least said, because I would have probably still made fun of this, but I would have had much more respect if one of these two theaters were the big one and then the smaller venue had at least reached out and said, we have chosen for our own personal political philosophy not to engage with this. Okay, fine. But the silence tells me you're right, they know you're right, and they have no response to it.
But also, this is not like Michael Moore staging a play or Dinesh D'Souza coming up with a new production. This is someone on stage reading text messages. So in theory, this should have zero political impact. Now, it does for two reasons. One, the texts are rather damning, but also I don't think the media, and certainly not popular culture, has really avoided this whole conversation. I mean, there have been some stories in the news about these particular text exchanges, but it didn't become a narrative. It didn't become a cause célèbre. It didn't become part of what the media organizations are talking about on a consistent basis. It was like, got to mention it once, then we're going to move on. So the fact that there's a show that's putting the spotlight on those particular texts, it means something. And I agree. If they had reached out and said we don't want to get into any political skirmishes, at least I could quasi-respect that. But at the end of the day, it's artists. It's free expression. You should be standing up for that. And conversely, if this was the Mueller report, which was read without incident, and someone threatened violence and the theater had to shut down, how much would you say they'd be scrambling to say this is about free speech, this cannot happen, this cannot stand, we really admonish anyone who's doing this. It's those Trump fans, the MAGA crowd, it's racist, it's sexist, it's homophobia. I think you would have heard all of that.
This is yesterday I talked about Orwell with regard to D-Day, and a lot of times people forget that the more important lesson of Orwell was not just newspeak and not just, up is down and down is up and war is peace, etc., but it was about brainwashing people into how and what they think. And I think that this is one of those examples where you by your silence are taking away a voice so that even if somebody is anti-Trump, would have actually found maybe some humor in the context of these emails. I mean, these are two lovebirds. Imagine, forget what they may have said about the insurance policy and we're going to get Trump and I'm worried that, what if Hillary doesn't? Forget about all of those parts of the text messages. Just think about the humor involved in now you've got these two lovebirds. And I mean, I think somewhere, and I'm certainly not going to tell you where, but I think somewhere in my possession, Tamara has kept all of the letters that we exchanged as sweethearts. Mm-hmm. Can you imagine getting your hands on those and reading some of those now? I mean, people would laugh their asses off.
And I think that this whole topic would have been so ripe for a Saturday Night Live sketch, maybe a cold open. But of course, the sort of the time frame is over now. We already know about it a bit. So it wouldn't work if it went out today. But that's the kind of material that you would think a satire show would feast on. And you could also mock them for conducting an affair via government phone texts. That's just stupid on steroids. But just you could have a lot of fun with it. But it's a narrative that the left doesn't want to get near, and it's a narrative that the left doesn't want to protect as far as the getting that message out there. And that's why I went 0 for 14.
Now, I have to ask you this, though. As you were, after we finished last week and you said you were going to you reach out to all these theaters and you were going to ask these questions, there was no doubt in my mind that you would ask the question the right way. It would be open-ended. You would be professional, yada, yada, yada. Was there in the back of your mind a belief that there were 14, that at least one would reply? Or did you really think that this was a futile exercise, but you had to go through the exercise to make the point?
I would have predicted between 2 and 5 answers.
Oh, wow, really?
That's what I thought. And I don't know what they would have said, but I
don't care what they would have said.
I would have written it.
Right.
I mean, the headline of the story was predicated on what they said. So if they all said this is an outrage, I would say a small but vocal minority of theaters said this is an outrage. If a small group said, I don't care, I would say theater community shrugs its shoulders. But when I go 0 for 14, then the kind of story writes itself.
Have you had any response from McAleer or anybody else about, has anybody commented or anything about the story?
Well, but before I wrote it, I reached out to him. I said, hey, I wrote out to McAleer. I said, I did this story. I asked for a response. It's looking like 0 for 14. What's your reaction? So I put that in the story. What can you say at this point? Just this week alone, we know what's going on with YouTube. What's fascinating is, and we've talked about this for weeks on end now, the culture is moving so quickly and clamping down on free speech so swiftly and dramatically. I can't believe it. And what I've said for weeks and months and even years now is that Hollywood's silence is unacceptable. And for a community that complains about everything down to Trump's tweets, they can't spare a syllable about this play being canceled. And actually, the play will go on, but just we know what the context here. But also, people getting kicked off of YouTube for having the wrong thinking. It's amazing what's going on, and the creative community cannot lift a finger, cannot raise their voice. I knew it, but I'm still shocked.
I think, and I'm disappointed. I'm only slightly older than you, but I'm in the baby boomer generation, and the baby boomer generation was all about being able to speak your mind out against the Vietnam War, being able to speak your mind out against authority, being able to speak your mind out against your teachers and your educators and your elders. I mean, it was all about, obviously free love, but it was also a big movement about free speech. Mm-hmm. Where the hell are the baby boomers?
They're silent. And is the silence fear of reprisal, which is legitimate? Or is the silence, the voices I don't like are being silenced. So I'm kind of okay with that. I'm not going to get too upset about it.
I'm afraid it's the latter. I'm afraid that it is the baby boomers are, and look, there is, I have to fight against this myself. There are days when I look at what, for example, yesterday, watching all of the stuff, or day before yesterday, watching all of the stuff on YouTube and the demonetization of Steven Crowder and everybody else that's getting pulled down. I watch it, and there's a part of me, it's just horrible to say, but there's a part of me that's just like, this is so overwhelmingly stupid and so overwhelmingly un-American, if not anti-American. I just can't take it anymore.
Yeah, I'm stunned by it. It's the speed that scares me too. I think that our culture moves more quickly than it ever has, and that's obviously part of the digital age where, hey, it used to be I'll wait till 8 o'clock to watch my favorite show, and now I need to see my show now or I'm angry. Like we went from A to B really quickly, but I think that the free speech attacks are happening with that same speed, if not faster, and it's just stunning. And do they really think they're not going to come for them next? That the smug liberals are going to say, well, they're not going to touch me. They're coming for you too. Don't you realize that? Don't you have any grasp of history whatsoever? I don't think they do. Or maybe they should think that if they keep doing the right thing, that they'll escape unscathed. But here's the thing. What's offensive today will change tomorrow. So they'll be chased down for something that they said in good honest, open debate now. We don't know what's going to be happening in 2 years or 1 year or 6 months. Like the word queer was once offensive, and now people who are gay have kind of embraced it. Whatever. But if you said it a few years ago, you might get hounded. If you say it today in the right context, you could be fine. What about next year? Will it go south again? Will it have a negative connotation? I don't know.
Well, I thought you were keeping the rule book.
It's got all this invisible ink. There's lots of corrections. It's a mess. It's a mess.
So along the same line, so here we have the theaters that have, in essence, succumbed, assuming that there were legitimate death threats, which I question, but let's assume there were legitimate death threats or threats of violence. So they have succumbed to the heckler's veto, while at the same time you have a story in front of me that some celebrities not only look, and I get some celebrities, some people, in fact, some Republicans, Justin Amash, some Republicans actually want Donald Trump impeached. Okay, that's a political issue. That's something that ought to be out in the open. We ought to debate it. You're for it, you're against it, whatever else. But here's the rest of the headline. Furious celebs. They can't just be celebs. They have to be furious celebs. Furious celebs want Trump impeached and then assaulted and tortured to death.
And you're not even exaggerating. Bette Midler this week alone said that she suggested maybe he should be shivved, which is like that sort of prison knife you kind of stick in someone to hurt or kill them.
You take your toothbrush and you file it down to where you got a nice shiv, and then you wrap some tape around it, and then you walk down the hall. How do I know so much about this? And then I
was thinking that too.
and then you walk down the hallway and you make sure you get it just in the side so you get the liver or something, and boom, they're dead. Man, I know way too much about shivving.
I'm kind of glad we're not in the same studio anymore.
I can demonstrate.
She did delete that tweet. Good for her. But it's out there. And again, Roseanne Barr said one racist tweet, her career has been expunged. It's gone. She's a non-person in Hollywood. You think Bette Midler will face a molecule of disagreement or suffering for saying that the president of the United States should face a shiv attack? No, of course not.
Of course.
And by the way, remember the rodeo clown who did a spoof of Obama?
Yes.
He was chased out of polite society. And then Hank Williams Jr. I think he did some sort of clumsy comment comparing Obama to Hitler, something pretty crude and pretty dumb.
Something is pretty normal today reversed.
Oh, it's a day in the week ending in Y. He lost his Monday Night Football gig for years. I think maybe 6 or 7 years until they finally let him back. I mean, the double standards are – it's like you're wearing 3D glasses, and it's going to get worse. And just think if it's President Biden in 2 years, whatever, if a conservative says one thing against him, they're going to lose their career. It's going to swing right back.
Can you imagine something you said made me just think about this. So we're getting closer and closer to the first Democrat presidential debate, and I can just imagine what they'll be saying about Trump and Republicans in general. And then before we know it, I mean, in just the blink of an eye, we're going to be in the general election. We're going to be, past the conventions, and it's going to be, July, August of 2020, and we're going to be running up to November. Can you imagine just how shrill it is going to get?
I can't. I don't want to say I'm looking forward to it. I guess as a if I can kind of be a disembodied spectral ghost and watch it from above, think about the media bias. Think about the media reporters literally breaking out pom-poms to root on whoever is facing Donald Trump, because it's going to happen, because you're seeing it now, and it's going to be 10, 20, 30-fold by the time that July 2020 date appears. It's going to be riotous. And I think it's going to really backfire when people are going to, I think you'll have to be in a coma not to see it at that point that, oh my gosh, they're not being remotely fair. And that could swing in Trump's benefit. You never know.
Oh, you and I are going to have so much fun. So I'm putting off the story I know you're desperate to get to. I'm putting that off simply because I know it involves The View. And so everybody listening to the podcast is hanging by their fingernails waiting for The View. Instead, I want to go because I know nothing about this. You sent it to me at the last minute. Mm-hmm. I don't even know about this movie. The Secret Life of Pets 2. I never saw The Secret Life of Pets 1 or The Secret Life of Pets 0, if there was, depending on how you count. I haven't seen any of those. There's something wrong with this movie?
Yeah, it supports marriage. It supports heteronormity and also toxic masculinity.
Pets.
A cartoon, an animated film about pets and what they do when people aren't looking.
An animated cartoon about dogs and cats?
Yes.
It
takes a minute to wrap your brain around it, doesn't it?
Have you seen this movie?
I have not seen the movie. I'm calling up the review. I want to read because I can't paraphrase this. It's got to be read, directly from the source. But this is what I often talk about with movie critics is that back in the day, a movie critic said, "Hey, it's a good movie. Hey, it's a bad movie. Save your money, spend your money," and that was all well and good. And then the movie critics got woke and they started to put their ideology into what they review. Now, I do that to a certain degree, but I work for a conservative website, my own, and that is what my audience expects. And I certainly don't disagree with someone from Mother Jones. If they've got movie critics on staff and they do cover entertainment, if they review it and they kind of put on their ideological blinders, then good, because that's what their audience is. But these are mainstream critics losing their minds over dogs that don't see eye to eye with their worldview.
I can't get my head around. I'm sitting here looking at the story that you sent, and there's a Universal Pictures that is credited with the photograph of an animated little boy with two sweet-looking dogs. Everybody's got a smile on their face, including the dogs. And somehow I'm supposed to read into this toxic masculinity.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my gosh. Just shoot me.
It's from the Wrap.com. And by the way, the Wrap.com has a really great reporter. His name is John Levine, and he's their media reporter. And I've interviewed him. He's a really trustworthy guy. He's smart. I don't know where he stands ideologically, but he'll definitely poke both sides when necessary. So within – yeah, and I appreciate that they have him. And I think that the Wrap has gotten a little better because it used to be kind of consistently far left. I think that maybe some of his colleagues have been a little bit sort of more balanced. But so I'll read you a couple I'll read a couple of quotes from the review. It says the movie effectively acts as an animated ode to heteronormativity, toxic masculinity, and patriarchal worldviews, passed off as a harmless plot points to entertain young audiences.
Think about
Let that sink in.
All right, so let's just use your two children, your two crazy-ass boys. Would you take them to see this movie? And if so, would you be concerned about whether or not they would walk away with heteronormativity, toxic I can't even say the words.
I know.
Toxic masculinity or patriarchal worldviews? Would they be skewered by this? Would they walk away with their minds warped?
They would probably eat all the candy I snuck into the theater, and I couldn't give a rat's patoot what they think about heteronormativity. Not my worry.
In fact, I think you should do like a short YouTube of just asking both of your kids to explain. Where is it again? Ask them to just explain the word heteronormativity.
That's a great idea.
I don't even. If you ask, I don't know. So I'd have to break it down. Hetero, so I assume opposite of homosexual, heterosexual. Normativity, I assume something about normalcy or normalness. But when I put them together, like separately, I can make sense of them, but together, I can't make any sense of it.
It ain't like peas and carrots, let me tell you. I want to read a little more. It says Pets 2's descent into the bowels of what reads as conservative messaging begins. Then he kind of describes some of the plot. And so he's upset. It says, in this fictional universe, that's clearly the only natural progression of events in a woman's life, meaning that she gets married and has a kid. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. That happens quite frequently in culture where people get married and have children. It seems like a fairly common occurrence.
And in fact, I would don't shoot the messenger,
Okay.
Don't turn off your Skype. Don't refuse to come back on the podcast. But I would venture to say that despite everything we read about gay marriage or gay unions or transsexuals or transvestites or whatever other kinds of things there are, that the vast majority is still heterosexual marriage.
And if you're making a story and you want to kind of appeal to a wide audience, chances are you might want to reflect that in your film. Fair to say?
Well, I would say it's fair to say, but then I don't know. I also notice in here that, that Louis C.K. was originally going to be one of the voices. But
he was in the first film, I think.
Oh, but you can't have Louis C.K. come back even as a voice because the Rugrats that will be in the theater will somehow be, I don't know, perverted by the voice of Louis C.K., whom I'm sure 99.99% have no clue who he is.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that was part of his he was erased from pop culture as well when he admitted to self-pleasuring himself in front of people without their permission, or, it was listen, I don't support what he did, but it was interesting. He was completely wiped out from all sort of projects, and including this one.
But he was replaced by Patton Oswalt, and if I recall correctly, Patton Oswalt, who I do find funny on occasion, has also said some really horrible things about Donald Trump.
Oh, yeah.
But that's okay.
He's a fire. Oh, of course it's okay.
Oh, okay.
It's expected.
Okay,
yeah.
okay, all right. Well,
so then the critic is upset that another character also dreams of getting married and having a family. It gets worse. So it's not just the one pet that gets married. It's another pet wants to get married. And that's one more. So there's something called the Bechdel test, Bechdel.
Bechdel Corporation, they're a big contract. They're a big government contractor. They did a lot of work in Iraq and Afghanistan. They're a huge multinational corporation.
This might be a spin-off of that organization.
Oh, okay.
Because all it means is that when you're watching a movie, if there's a scene with two women, and if they're talking to each other, and there is not a conversation that's tied to a man, that means it is past the Bechdel test.
You have single-handedly ruined the movie industry for me.
Not my fault. They did it first. So so we're talking about a dog voiced by a female actress, Jenny Slate. And so that character, this is from the review, she partners with a dismissive cat named Chloe, voiced by Lake Bell. But in no way can this movie possibly pass the Bechdel test. So can you imagine sitting there watching a kids animated movie thinking, are there enough female characters in this scene to pass the Bechdel test? I have to think about that. Imagine the thought process that goes into that person as he's sitting there in a seat watching The Secret Life of Pets 2.
No. What I imagine is, how when you go to you go to Broadway and the playbill is, the playbill is what, 20 pages long? I mean, it's a fairly thick little booklet. I can now see that there's a whole new rating system. And as you go into the movie theater, along with paying your, $49.95 for a ticket for a crappy seat, that you will now get a playbill that is actually a politically correct review of the movie, telling you this movie passed or did not pass the Bechdel test. Here is where you might want to avert your eyes or ears because here is a failure of the Bechdel test. I can't even believe I'm using the word Bechdel test on the podcast. But can you imagine that's the guide you would have to have in order to properly consume the content?
Or maybe like when you go to the ball game, you bring a scorecard. You want to keep score. Mm-hmm. Maybe you have like a scorecard for how woke the particular movie is. Like, a female and female scene, check. Or, that was empowering, check. That's a double check. It happened twice, check. Oh, wait, that toxic masculinity, that's a negative. I'm going to have to erase this.
I do not want to ever pretend to tell you how or what to write, but I think there's a nugget of a story right there about how to go to movies.
I was just thinking, my mind is already going back to asking my kids to see this movie, then quizzing them on these questions. What does that mean, Daddy?
Please do. Because you don't have to tell them anything about what it means. All you have to do is just, because you're good at this, because you did it with the email. You just ask the kids the open question. Just explain, what's that word, hetero something? Just, hey, kids, tell me what this word means. And then you just zip your lips, the camera's on them, and you just sit there. So, kids, you just saw Secret Life of Pets 2. Were you upset by the toxic masculinity on display? Jimmy, your comment. Go for it. You got to go for it.
I want my mommy. This man is hurting me.
Okay, so before we run out of time, apparently we haven't had a view clip in a couple of weeks, but we have a doozy of a view clip. And
now, there was one word in this clip that made me want to share it with the audience.
Yes, and I've double-checked with the powers that be, and this will not take away the non-explicit nature of my podcast.
As Borat would say, very nice.
Very nice, very nice. And in fact, I have determined that if I were still on radio, I could actually play this clip on the radio too. Now, I have narrowed it down. This is Whoopi. They're talking about Nikki Haley and abortion rights. Should we tell them the word in advance so they can train their ear to hear it?
No. It's so good. It's so juicy. No, I don't want to say juicy. That's inappropriate.
Okay, let's see. Stop recording. Rewind. Take a sip of Diet Coke. Restart the recording. Okay, now we're back. Here we go. In 3, 2, 1.
Planned Parenthood is much more than an abortion clinic. Much, much more. They do many more things. So basically, I'm
sorry. I got to stop. Planned Parenthood is so much more than an abortion clinic. I have studied this for years. And other than being able to, because I happen to be married to someone who's a school counselor, knows that at Planned Parenthood, she can send young teenage girls who are actively engaged in sexual activities in order to get birth control. But if you want to go to Planned Parenthood for, say, a pap smear or anything else, it's not going to happen. Not going to happen.
That is the narrative, though.
All right, let me back this up. Let me, and in 3, 2, 1.
Maybe, but so where do the women go when they need to have a vaginal check? Where do they go? Planned Parenthood is much more than an abortion clinic. Much, much more. They do many more things. So basically, you're saying, I'm getting rid of this so you can't have this conversation anymore. Because I'll tell you the truth. Mm-hmm. If a woman wants to do this, she's going to do it. Taking choice only means you're making it more dangerous. Now, again, I don't say that everybody has to believe. But I say, you want to have choice? I don't want you in my coochie.
I don't want you in my coochie.
Clip of the year.
Coochie. I don't want you in my coochie.
The instant I saw that on Twitter, I retweeted it and I tagged you, and I think you did see it.
I did. I liked it instantly.
And by the way, we often make fun of the View hosts because they're not always articulate. And I think that's an understatement. But I think from the pro-choice perspective, I think Whoopi was more articulate than she or her colleagues often are. Is that fair?
I think it's totally fair. And because I like to come to this segment prepared, I want you to know that coochie is actually in the dictionary. Oh. And the definition is, it is a noun. It is of late 19th century origin. It was originally denoting an erotic dance and was probably short for coochie coochie or hoochie coochie. And the current sense dates from the 1980s. The current meaning of coochie is a female's genitals. And there is your etymology lesson for the day.
I'm flashing back to watching Charo on Love Boat episodes.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry, Christian.
Look at you doing homework. I like this.
Well, I had to make sure I could actually use the word gootchie without getting in trouble with, I don't know, iTunes or somebody. I don't.
Oh, my gosh.
Good grief.
There you go. We have checked the view box. Oh.
You know, I could have played more of it, but afterwards, Anna Navarro, isn't that her name?
Yeah.
She goes on in this rambling, I don't know what it was, has nothing to do with Whoopi's point about I don't want you in my coochie. It was like it was such a non sequitur. I couldn't decide whether do I want to, because I don't want to take away from Whoopi's coochie comment.
Mm-hmm.
That's quite an alliteration right there, the Whoopi coochie comment. I didn't want to go away from that, but the rest of it just devolved into nonsensical. Well, it's kind of like it. I don't know whether it's the Bechdel test or what, but it failed miserably.
Listen, the few times where the view makes sense, it doesn't last. It doesn't linger. It doesn't have a hangover effect. You've got to kind of grab those moments and clutch them to your bosom until all heck breaks loose, the crosstalk happens, and they get really, really dumb. And that's, inevitable. So I cling to these moments of clarity.
I know. It's wonderful. Well, thank you for sending it. I have a question to ask you before we go, though. Have you seen Rocket Man?
Yes.
And thumbs up, thumbs down, or is that trademarked? Can you not do thumbs up, thumbs down?
I think it is trademarked, but I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it less than Bohemian Rhapsody. I think that it's more creative than Bohemian Rhapsody because it takes more chances with the storytelling. But I really felt connected to Freddie Mercury. I was really rooting for him throughout his career. And by the time the Live Aid concert, which is capping the movie, I was really on his side. And I think with Rocket Man, even though Taron Egerton does a very compelling version of Elton John and sings quite like him, I didn't get that sense of urgency from the story. It was just that he was treated shabbily by his parents. The mom was indifferent. The dad was extraordinarily cold. And he had a lot of emotional wounds, which he often would sort of, take drugs to deal with. And there's nothing wrong with that. I get that. It's part of the human condition. But I didn't feel as wrapped up in the story as I did with Bohemian Rhapsody. So that's my verbose review.
Okay. Well, that's good enough. That's good enough for me.
Okay.
I'd still like to see it.
Yeah, it's not bad.
Yeah. Okay.
And if you love the music, you got to enjoy it. And it's a little bit like a jukebox musical where they kind of shake things up a bit and they don't follow a strict chronological order.
Oh,
so,
okay. All right.
Just know that going in.
That's actually a very good description. I like that.
Huh.
It's like a jukebox what? It's a jukebox what?
Musical. They use it on Broadway where they'll take like a whole bunch of Billy Joel songs, put them in a show, kind of concoct a story around it, but it's just an excuse to hear the great music.
Okay. All right. Well, then I will go see it. Well, so thanks for joining Michael Brown Unplugged. Do you got anything else for us today? Is that it? Is that the best you can do? Heteros, whatever it was? Hetero coochie or something. Hetero coochie, was that it?
I want to say coochie because I don't think I got the chance to say coochie. So there, I've said it. My work is done.
All right. Come back next Friday, all right?
If I have to.
Hollywood and Toto. Be sure and follow Christian on Twitter at Hollywood and Toto and get to his website, hollywoodandtoto.com, because he writes lots of stories where nobody responds to him.
That's my new tagline.
That's right. Where I ask Hollywood all these questions, met with nothing but stone cold silence.
Hollywood and Toto ignored since 2014.
All right. I'll talk to you later. Take care.
All righty.
And finally, let me just ask everybody to do me a favor. If you subscribe to me on iTunes, if you could leave a 5-star rating, that would be great. And if you could leave a written review, that would be even better. But I've got one extra item I'd like to ask you to do, and that is on Spreaker. If you listen to me on Spreaker, if you could follow me on Spreaker, I've been studying about what it takes to get on certain other podcast platforms, and some indicate that I need 100 followers in order to get onto some of these platforms, and I have 87 followers. So I need 13 more people to get to that magical 100 number on Spreaker. So if you listen on Spreaker, if you could go over and click the follow button on Spreaker, that would be fantastic. And then, of course, as I always tell you, if you'd like to follow me on social media, just go to my website, michaelbrowntoday.com. michaelbrowntoday.com. And whether it's on YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, whatever it is, wherever you're participating, if you'd like to participate with me on social media, simply go to michaelbrowntoday.com. Everybody have a great weekend, and I'll talk to you again on Monday.